just to back up a little bit, I mean, Peter and Myroslava, you recall that during the time of the latest Nagorno-Karabakh war, the sticking point was the legal boundaries of Nagorno-Karabakh in Soviet Armenia as an autonomous area. So there was a lot of kind of legalism attached to those boundaries. Peter, two things. One is, as you know, I was doing the Ukraine financial news for many years, and 80% of Ukraine's imports and exports go out by sea. What are the prospects that the Russian fleet could simply blockade the ports in the Black Sea and the Azov? And once again, part of the claims to the historic area of Donetsk means taking Mariupol. I think you wrote that last night, which is maybe the 5th largest port in Ukraine. What are the prospects of a sea blockade, which is sort of painless? I mean, there aren't, dead people all over the place. You're just blockading ports.
Yeah, it would be arguably the smart money for the smart move for the Russians. It would be the easiest thing for them to do militarily. It would be the cheapest thing for them to do militarily. They've already now put the pieces in place. I don't imagine that the ships that have been moved to the Black Sea in the last 2 weeks will leave. I believe they'll stay there. Non-Black Sea nations are subject to extensive limitations into what they can bring into the Black Sea. The convention in place since the 1930s with Turkey places a lot of limitations there. So America can't just load up the Black Sea with ships, for example, or Britain or any other NATO nation. The only countries that can do what they want there, more or less, are Black Sea nations. Russia obviously counts as one. So I assume that they will maintain the presence there, and they have that option. It's not a very complex option. It would create potential problems legally, but Russia's disregard for international law is fairly open secret now. They don't really care, and I think Putin's been proved right in that. He's broken international law repeatedly and had very minor costs to pay. So I think he assumes that this would be quite a cheap option, and then the pressure would be on Ukraine. The economic pressure would be huge, and it would really become. It would be effectively a siege. It would be a siege to see who would outlast, and much would depend on the readiness of the international community to pay for Ukraine. For countries like Germany, who don't want to arm Ukraine, to say, okay, well, we will finance Ukraine, to start putting across big money to keep the Ukrainian economy afloat. And that's I think that's limited. They might do that, but not perhaps long term.
Well, the biggest choke point are the Black Sea and Azov ports. I did an editor's note last summer. Would NATO fight for Snake Island? And participant Snake Island is at the mouth of the Danube, but is Ukrainian. And if the Russians could invent a legal pretext because it was liberated by Soviet troops in '44, to take Snake Island, they would have almost a chain, which we did during the revolution, like chaining across the Hudson from one end of the Black Sea to the other of the Ukrainian ports. One thing, and participants, before I forget, please, I see several people sending questions. Please go ahead with the questions for Myroslava and Peter. Peter, I remember one time you and I had lunch in January, and I asked, what are you going to do for the Christmas holidays, the January holidays? You said you're going to read a biography of Churchill. Very impressive. So participants, all those books behind Peter, he's read. Okay, you read your biography of Churchill. I know it's an unfair comparison, but we have a wartime president now in Ukraine, Zelensky. How is he handling things, and are people rallying behind him? Sort of, my mother would say, faute de mieux, nothing better around. Elections are 2 years away. He's what we got. What's your take on Zelensky?
Well, I think there is a degree of. I think if we look broadly at how he's handled the conflict for the last few years, he's gone through quite a dramatic transformation. I mean, when he was campaigning in 2019, he was very naive. I think he did. I think genuinely believe that he could talk to Russia, that he could reason with them. Zelensky's background, I mean, Zelensky is a child of the Russian world, so to speak, in terms of the perception of the Russian speakers being part of a Russian cultural world, of a broader Russian society, which is so dear to Putin and his acolytes. Zelensky's very much part of that. His whole career was built about Russian language comedy and Russian language entertainment business throughout the former Soviet world and beyond. So he was very much involved in that and integrated into that community. And I think he believed that, based on his personal experience and his own worldview, that he'd be able to talk to the Russians, and it would actually just be a matter of sitting down and sharing some drinks perhaps in a nice big feast and just putting the world to rights. He spoke in the campaign, we just need to stop shooting, we need to sit down, we need to talk face to face. He's been disabused of all that now very seriously, very significantly. I think this was why he did turn quite notably a year ago with the closure of the Kremlin-linked TV channels, with the house arrest of Medvedchuk and a number of other measures. It became clear that he'd recognized there was no middle ground with Russia. Russia didn't want peace. Russia didn't want compromise, and he's since become sort of more hawkish. If we know, so that's his general sort of trajectory that he's undergone, I think, and he's become, he began it again when he came into power. He was very much like downplaying national symbols of Ukraine and Ukrainian patriotism. Now he ends every speech with Slava Ukraina and all these, the traditional symbolism of Ukraine. So he's become much more. He's bought into that a lot more, I think, largely through his own experience. In terms of his recent performance, I think that his calls for calm are understandable, but a risky policy. He's downplayed the threat of war consistently because he fears the economic damage it will cause, which is understandable and perhaps reasonable, but it's a very fine line to walk. I think he got a lot of credit for his performance last weekend at the Munich Security Conference. People who I know who don't like him at all, frankly, were impressed enough and were honest enough to say, "Wow, that was presidential. That was not even presidential. That was statesmanlike. His speech there, that was impressive." So I think he's growing. I mean, his learning curve is extremely steep. He had no political experience at all, and also he's very young. And he came from a different world. So, he's no fool. He's a smart guy. He was very successful in his previous showbiz career, not just simply because he's cute or funny. He's very smart. He's astute. He's nobody's fool, and he is learning. I think that the trajectory he's on is broadly quite positive. But having said that, I mean, I'm still not convinced he's a war leader, and as things progress, we'll see his real mettle. But he's not performed as badly as we may have feared he would at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And I do see that Paula Dwyer, the head of the OPC, asked the very same question. So everyone, keep your questions coming in.